Welcome to the India Special, brought to you by Yumping Amok. I'm Shipwreck Jones. I'll be your instructor for this class. Okay, today I'm going to be talking about the India Special. It's a factory planet chain which can produce up to P3 PI. And the way I designed it, I wanted it to be both a good chain in its own right, but also something that once you get Command Center upgrades 5, you could upgrade it to the Victor Special, which is capable of producing P4. Okay, so yeah, that's pretty much what I just said. It's a scaled down version of the Victor Special. It produces up to P3. Um, how many different types of P3 you'll be able to produce depends on how many planets you have, what they're producing. So yeah, once again, with these overviews like this, uh, take them with a grain of salt. There is a lot of variability that can go into it, but I did want to create something that could give you some idea of what the qualities of this chain were. Okay, so you need at least CCU4 on the character who is running the factory planet, but I would definitely recommend that all your characters that are running the P1 specialist that they have it as well. Um, you do want to, if you do intend on upgrading it to a Victor Special once you get CCU5, you want to plan ahead now. Put it on a barren or temperate world so that you can build an HTPP, and on a planet whose radius is not exceeding 2,830 kilometers. You're going to need at least 5 planets to be able to produce any P3, and as you add more P1 specialists, it'll start opening up the numbers of P3s that you can produce. You'll want to look up schematics, plan ahead, see what P3 you want to produce, and then what P1 specialist you need to create to be able to produce it. Okay. Yeah, once again, scaled down version of the Victor Special. It's not as productive as the Victor Special, and it can't produce the P4, but it's a lot easier to get into. So if you meet the recommended skill requirements that I outlined in the first video, you'll be able to do this chain no problem. Once again, it'll take you about 16, 17 days on a new character with no implants to do, so it's not bad at all. Um, Even if you don't intend to upgrade it later to a Victor Special, this setup still outperforms single planet production setups. You do pay a little bit more in taxes, but you'll make up for it in the number of units that you're able to produce. So here we have an overview of how the factory chain works. Of course, you have your multiple P1 specialists producing P1 to feed your factory planet, which then refines it into P2 and or P3. As for ratios, in nullsec, you should only need about 6 or 7 P1 specialists to keep a factory planet running full tilt. In highsec, you're going to have more problems. You're probably going to need around 12 to 14 planets to keep it running full time. If you don't have that number, you have a couple options. You can, of course, bring in a partner. You can train a PI alt up in about 16, 17 days, or you can buy intermediate PI from the market. That will, of course, increase your overhead. However, there are benefits to it. You'll be able to perhaps make more PI than you were capable of making, and it can help make up for shitty planets that are around you. So if you don't have any planets around you that are good for producing reactive gas or silicon, then you can just buy that from the market and concentrate on producing P1 on the planets that do have decent resource abundances. Okay, so first up we have the P1 specialist, and it's the same colony type as in the Victor special. Everything's pretty much the same. The only real difference is with CCU4 you're going to have less fitting room, so it's going to make things a little bit more difficult, lower your yield a little bit, but everything's the same other than that. Okay, and here's an example P1 specialist colony. You actually won't be able to deploy as many BIFs and or extractor heads as here, because in this example, he has CCU5, but the basic setup is exactly the same. I do once again want to point out, try and have your ECU try and cover multiple hotspots and then spread your extractor heads out among those hotspots. Uh, it'll help slow the depletion of them, which will help increase your yield and reduce the amount of moving that you have to do with your ECUs and EHs. Okay, so what happens if you don't have 15 planets to be able to produce all 15 P1s? Well, there are a lot of routes you can take, especially if you're not limiting yourself to end product PI. Um, I started trying to come up with various solutions to try and give you the biggest bang for your buck, but it was getting absurdly complex. So I'm just going to give you one example. Hopefully, it'll get you on the right track if you want to do something else. So here in this example, so say you're a T2 industrialist, you're living out in nullsec, so you don't have easy market access, uh, and you're not worried about making implants. So you're not concerned with profit margins or making transcranial microcontrollers and cryoprotected solution because those are only used in making implants. But you do want to be able to make the most amount of end products that you can with the fewest amount of planets. So here's an example like pathway you could take. If you have like two characters with 5 planets each, you'd start with 10 P1 specialists, make everything in there. And then like you add a partner, another PI alt, then you can start adding in more planets, as they start training up. Okay, so now we have our factory planet. Once again, it only requires command center upgrades 4. You can produce up to P3, and you can easily switch up what you want to produce without needing to demolish any buildings. You only need to change the schematics and the routing. Once again, you want a low tax rate when you set this up. And of course, no expedited transfers, which is great. It'll run continuously as long as you keep topping it off with P1. Storage times are still rather short, even with fewer AIFs, but we make really good use of them, so you're rarely going to have any AIFs idle. Okay, uh, when you set up your India 3, if you are looking to eventually upgrade it into a Victor 4, you need to plan that out now. You need to build it on a barren or a temperate planet whose radius is 2,830 kilometers or less. So your links can't use more than 15 power grid. I also recommend setting it up in such a way that once you do get CCU5, you can just pop in the extra buildings, link them up, and then you're ready to rock and roll. Okay, so here we have the colony layout of the India 3. Uh, I did it this way. I took a Victor 4 and then grayed out the buildings that you don't have fitting room, just to show you how you might want to set it up if you are eventually looking to upgrade it to a Victor 4. Okay, so first off, we have the P2 configuration. So all your AIFs can work producing P2. They can produce one type of P2, or you can switch it up, have them produce different types of P2s. Your input is going to be 1,680 units of P1 total, and it'll churn out 105 units of P2 for you. Your max runtime will be 31 hours. So, and here's a visualization of how you configure things. It's all pretty simple right now. Uh, for P3 107 production, you'll end up being able to run 20 of your 21 AIFs in service of producing P3 107. You'll have one idle AIF which you can use to either produce 5 P2 an hour, or you can demolish it to make room for a launch pad. or a storage facility, but there's really no benefit to a storage facility over a launch pad. And if you go with the launch pad, you'll be able to keep avoiding having to use expedited transfers. So with 3 launch pads, you increase your runtime to 61 hours, which means you would only have to visit your planet every 2 days. And it would take an input of 1,280 total units of P1 per hour and produce 12 units of P3107 per hour. And here's a visualization of the configuration. Uh, like I said in my Victor special video, I like these charts, these pictures, because they help me set up my schematics and my routing, just keep everything straight. So I'll keep this picture open on one of my screens while I set up my stuff on the other. So, and finally we have P3 160 production. The the way the math works out and the schematics work out, it all works out perfectly. So all of your AIFs will be working full time to produce 9 P3 160 per hour. Your max run time is 36 hours, so you'd have to fill it up once per day. Okay, and so now you have your visualization for P3 160 production. One thing that I meant to mention earlier is I I took a planet with Command Center upgrades 5. The Command Center was upgraded to level 6. Your actual power grid, max CPU and power grid won't be that high, but this will work with CCU4 and your Command Center upgraded to level 5. All right. For hybrid configurations, I kind of looked at it to see the P3 160 configuration is already like perfect, nothing idles. Uh, but there is that one idling AIF on P3 107 production. So I tried playing around with it to see if I could come up with anything better. The best I could come up with, was a configuration that was producing 6 P3107 per hour and 4.5 P3160 per hour. Basically, 20 of your AIFs will all be running full time, and then one AIF that's producing P3160 would only be working half the time. I didn't do a color coded visualization for it. I'll leave the details for you to you. All right, so here's the end of our presentation, and it's also the end of my video series on PI. There are other setups, which I did not go into great detail on, which I may eventually do videos on depending on interest. However, there are a lot of other topics that I do want to cover, so I'm going to be working on those next. Once again, Yumping is recruiting. If you want to get your hands on some of that sweet, sweet nullsec cheddar while hanging out with a friendly bunch of idiots, check out our Endgame Corp ad or join our recruitment channel, Yumping in Public.